Jay, the floor is all yours, my brother. Come on in. For the next 40, 45 minutes. Do you want me to send you a 5 minutes? You're muted, brother. We're going to need to hear you. There you go.
Okay. Are we there?
We're there, baby. You want me to send you a 5 minute warning?
Please do. Thank you, Eric.
You got it, brother.
Thanks for asking me to come on here. Hi, everybody. My name is Jay Mallet. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My friend Loretta, thank you, Loretta. I got in touch with Eric, and it's incredible. My spirit feels awake being with you guys. What a bunch of nuts you all are! I think it's awesome. The thumper stumper and just the attitude of everybody. I wish every new person could see what it looks like to be around a bunch of recovered alcoholics. You guys you light me up as I'm sitting here, and it's incredible because you read when I take my guys through the book. The first thing I read to them is that first paragraph of Forge of the First Edition, where we go through the word recovered, because that for a long time I came in here and I was told that we never recover from this thing. We never recover. We do recover from a hopeless state of mind and body. I have recovered from that, and I'm here through God's grace and mercy. I found a God of my understanding through the 12-step process and really really good sponsorship. Um, I finally got with a guy who happened to be a complete stranger to me, who was a no nonsense kind of guy. And I'll talk about this a little bit. Was a really important part of what my process was like. I came around Alcoholics Anonymous for a really really long time, and I came to meetings where I was told things like, shoot for midnight, the usual stuff, shoot for midnight, don't drink no matter what, and so forth. And I would sit there in these meetings and I would think, man, and Earl H talks about this. I drink no matter. I'm the flip side of that, man. I drink no matter what. Um, and I just couldn't pull off this whole meeting makers make it thing or any of that stuff. And thank God a man entered my life. I called a complete stranger when I got sober because I was so desperate. I'll talk about that in my story. At the end, for me, it's very, very bleak. I'm suicidal generally. I just can't see a way out because I think that I've tried Alcoholics Anonymous because I've made a whole bunch of meetings and I failed miserably at trying to stay sober on self will. And I just don't see any way out because I figured if I can't do Alcoholics Anonymous right, where else do you go from here? There's no other place for me to go, and I just figured I'd end up in an asylum or dead. And to tell you the truth, at the end of my drinking, that's where I'm kind of okay with either one of those options because I just don't think that I'll ever be able to live my life sober, happy and sober on purpose at the same time. I had never been able to pull that off, and through this guy who, and I love in Bill's story when Bill talks about the look in Ebby's eyes, and that's what grabbed me with this guy. Anyway, I'll get to that in a minute. I come from a normal family. Both my parents drank, and they drank every night. I grew up in an upper middle class family in North New Jersey, and my parents had a full liquor cabinet, and they both worked two jobs, and they would come home every night, and the first thing that I would see was my parents go to they would still have their coats on. My mother especially would have her coat on, and she would go to the liquor cabinet before she'd take her coat off, and she'd then go to the refrigerator, put some ice in this glass, and then fill this glass up with scotch and take a sip of scotch, and then she would go put her coat away and then settle in for her 4, 5, 6 scotch night that was normal for her. And my father joined her at the beginning for a long time, and he finally decided that he didn't want to argue with her till midnight anymore, and he stopped drinking. He's obviously a moderate drinker. My mom, for a very, very, very long time, until 2.5 years ago, actually, she's 88 now. I thought it was alcoholic. She drank every day that I've been alive until 2.5 years ago, and was given a sufficient reason to stop. Oh my God, you couldn't convince me of this ever. She was given a sufficient reason to stop. She had to gain 10 pounds because she's an old frail woman. She's 88 years old, and the doctor said, and you have to gain 10 pounds. You're going to have to stop drinking. And she said, oh, okay, I'll stop drinking. And she stopped drinking, and she gained 10 pounds, and she never picked up alcohol again, which is absolutely insane to me because she was an embarrassment to me as a kid. She was so drunk every night. She was drunk. And like I said, she's drank every day until, like I said, 2.5 years ago. But I'm raised in this family, and I'm the oldest of 5 children. And my life is reasonably normal outside of those insecurities that all children feel. I don't think I'm any different from any other kid by feeling insecure at 12 or 13 or 14. But I saw how my parents drank, and I saw the enjoyment they had, and I was somewhat restless, irritable, and discontent for a while prior to that. I don't know. That was kind of my default. obviously knowing nothing about alcoholism or any of that stuff. And I picked up a drink at 13. And by the time I was 14, I was drinking in the morning. I had a routine. Alcohol was magic to me. It was absolutely magic. Talk about a spiritual awakening. My spirit woke up. When I thought about alcohol, my spirit woke up. And then when I drank alcohol, my spirit, it was incredible. Um, and I used to wake up in the morning when I was 14 years old. Nobody else I knew was doing this. Um, and I would go downstairs before anybody got up, and I would go to my parents' liquor cabinet, and I would get a big tall glass, and I would pour some concoction of vodka and scotch and vermouth and gin into this glass, and I would take it back up to my room. And then I would go down back downstairs and get an equally big glass of Acme brand Farmdale grape juice, just to show you how important my drinking was. I'm 63. That was when I was 13, and I remember this Acme brand of Farmdale grape juice. It took on an immense proportion of importance in my life. And I would go upstairs and I'd take a little grape juice and I drink a little of this stuff, this concoction. And it was absolutely magic for me. And for a very, very long time in my life, that's the way I would drink. I fired for effect right from the beginning. There was no social drinking for me. It wasn't to be with people. It wasn't to be with friends. I drank alone. I preferred to drink alone. Later on, when some other alcohol substitutes came into my life, I used them alone as well, because there was never, whether it was alcohol or anything else, the way I looked at it was there was never enough for me, much less me and whoever else there might be there. Selfish and self-centered right from the beginning. And so I separated myself from everybody in my life. My younger brother and my three sisters. My mother and father had no idea what to do with me. Um, my drinking continued along those lines until I was 17, and my mother decided to buy me my own half gallon of Bankers Club vodka. I don't know if that's sold around the rest of the United States and around the world, but it's certainly not top shelf, if you know what I'm saying. And but I wasn't about quality. I was all about quantity. That's all I cared about. I need quantity, man. I need more. More is always better, no matter what I'm doing. Because she was tired of me drinking her Absolute vodka, and she was getting upset, so she would buy me my own. And you know, throughout the use of alcohol, uh, I really didn't have any relationship with my family, and I got a phone call. This is an example of the kind of damage I can do in 4 years of drinking from 13 to 17. I get a phone call from a friend in California. I'm a musician. He's a musician, and we played in some bars underage before he left for California. And he called me and he said, "Jay, what are you doing with your life?" And I said, "Absolutely nothing. I was actually working in a deli so that I could steal enough money so that I could drink on a regular basis from that deli." You know, the whole behavior thing already. And I was raised with moral and philosophical convictions galore. Believe me, I knew right from wrong, but I I needed money for drinking, so I had this job in this deli, and I said to him, "I'm not really doing anything with my life, you know." And he says, "Well, why don't you move to California? Why don't you move to San Diego?" And I say out loud, I'd love to move to San Diego, but I can't afford a plane ticket. And my mom is in the kitchen with me to my left, and I'm on one of those phones with the extension cord, it's attached to the wall. And my mom turns to me without missing a beat, and she says, I'll buy you a one-way ticket to California, right? Problem solved. Jay's gone." And I thought that was great, because then I had no responsibility, right? Nobody's looking over my shoulder about my drinking. My drinking had caused a lot of problems in school. I come from a place where you graduate high school, you go to college, you graduate college, you get a good job and all that kind of stuff. And I just didn't get the memo. I by the time I got to be a senior in high school, the principal came and brought me into his office and said, "Jay, if you pass all your classes with straight A's, you're still not going to graduate with your class." And of course, what I heard was, "Jay, you don't need to go back to school." And so I didn't. I decided not to do that. And so I would leave every morning and and sneak back into the house and drink the way I wanted to drink. And my parents were fed up with me drinking all their booze. And so I moved to San Diego with a guitar and $5 in my pocket, and a bag of clothes. No place to live, no job, nothing lined up at all. But I knew I could drink the way I wanted to drink out there, and nobody was going to tell me that I was drinking too much, or what I was doing was, um, a problem. And I did that for 4 years out there, and experimented with some other things that continue to make my life worse. And 4 years later, I did what any good alcoholic does, and I called my mommy and asked her if she would fly me home. And I remember I got on the plane in San Diego, and I thought, drinking has become a real problem in my life, and I need to stop drinking, so I'm not going to drink when I get home. And my parents agreed to bring me back into the house, and I was able to pull that off, man. I couldn't believe it. For 3 days, I was able to not drink. And and I walked past the liquor cabinet one day, and the door was open just enough for me to see my favorite bottle in there. And by that, I mean a full half gallon of vodka. I'm a vodka guy. I'm an anything guy, but I prefer cheap vodka. And like I have done so many times since, I poured a little bit into a, 2 or 3 shots into a glass, thinking in my head, how bad could this possibly be? And I woke the beast one more time, and that continued. I got married, and a lot of good things happened, but my alcoholism, I was able to slow down or moderate for very, very short periods of time, but pretty quickly after my marriage and children started to come, I started going to rehabs and detoxes and things like that, and I would go into these places with a firm resolve never to drink again. We talked about fraud, the emotional appeal, all that stuff was happening in my life. 3 beautiful children, a beautiful wife, a good life. And, when alcohol called me to drink, I drank. I didn't, I was incapable. I was unable to say no to alcohol for a really, really long time. And, it didn't really matter what happened. I eventually lost that family and those kids and all that kind of stuff. But I started coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, and at one point, I asked for this thing called a sponsor. Now, where I was going to AA, the book was not ever used, just about. It was a meeting maker thing, like I said at the beginning. And, I was told that if I felt bad after my first meeting, go to another meeting. And I remember going to 4 meetings one day. I never heard any talk of God or 12-step. What I heard about 12-step work was, don't rush it. There's, take your time, take it easy. And the problem with that for me, and I'm on a solution-based meeting, is that I can't last. I won't last at the beginning I could last maybe 3 months or 6 months if I was really lucky and I was pinned to a recovery house, and there were certain things that I would get kicked out if I drank or drug. But those time frames became shorter and shorter, and I wasn't able to hold on. I wasn't able to just muscle through anymore. And one day I went to 4 meetings, and I thought, as I walked out of the fourth meeting, I felt worse than when I walked into the first meeting. And this is when that kind of thinking of, I can't even do Alcoholics Anonymous right, I can't do AA right, and alcohol would call to me, and I would drink again. And I was living in South New Jersey at this time with a female friend of mine who was drinking just like I was drinking. And the last week in that apartment, I had to go to the hospital twice because alcohol was doing some things to my insides that were not very good. And I had met a couple of people. I met this one kid, and he was a lot younger than I was. I was in my 50s, and he was happy and sober at the same time on purpose, and I had never been that. And I called him up, and I said, I need to make a move. I need to do something. I don't know what I need to do, because I've been trying this AA thing for a really long time, and it's not working for me. And I don't know what else to do. And he says, you've never really tried AA. You've been to a few meetings, but you've never done what Alcoholics Anonymous asked you to do. Moved to Philadelphia, which is where I live now. And I moved to Philadelphia, and I moved into a recovery house. God's magic worked. It's incredible. I moved into this recovery house, and 3 days out of the hospital, and my roommate at the recovery house was this young kid who had already let me know that he wasn't there to get sober. He was there to appease his father. And once he was able to do that, he was going to move out. And on the third day, I looked out the back door, and he was sitting out at the picnic table with this other man, and they had the blue book open, and the blue book was foreign to me at this point. I mean, I knew what it was. I had never really been through it. I had read some stories in the back. And the kid came in, and I asked him, I said, who was that? And he said, that's my sponsor. I said, what's his name? And he says, his name's Alex. I said, could I have Alex's number? He said, sure. Now, this is my $12 story. I have $12 at the time. And this is what $12 looks like to me. I'm in Philadelphia. There's a lot of things going on in Philadelphia. I'm an alcoholic at heart, but my drug bone is connected to my drink bone. and I'm willing to do anything that'll shut this mind off for a little piece of time. I prefer vodka and I prefer oblivion. That's where I like to go, but I'll take whatever else comes along. I'm not a specialist. My favorite drug is what do you got? And I have $12, and I'm thinking that's either a pint of vodka and some loose cigarettes. They sell them that way here in Philadelphia. You can buy Lucy's, or it's a pack of cigarettes, or it's a $2 bus ride down to a sorted part of the city, and then I could get something else. And I get this guy Alex's phone number, who I don't know at all. I've obviously never met him, and I call him up and I said, Alex, my name is Jay, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm in dire need of help. I know I'm gonna drink again because my head is telling me that you need a drink. And when my head tells me that, I don't know how to say no, and I say yes, and I really had this overwhelming feeling that I was nearing the end of something. I don't know if that's an overwhelming feeling of death or what it was. It was just had been really bleak for me for a really long time. Um, many nights just drinking alone, crying, all that stuff, emotional stuff. And Alex says to me, he says, "Well, I can't come back today, but I can come back tomorrow at 4 o'clock." He said, just can you stay sober till then? And I was honest. I said, I really don't know. I'm not sure if I can do that. My head's screaming at me, and I really don't. I don't know what to do. And he said, do the best you can. Even if you can't, I'll be there at 4 o'clock, which I thought was really awesome. And we hung up the phone, and I decided to go up and buy a pack of cigarettes and stay sober that night, or stay abstinent that night. And Alex came back the next day at 4 o'clock, like he said he was going to, and he brought his book. He had his book under his arm, and I thought, oh boy, not sure what this is going to be like, you know. I figured he'd just open it and start reading some stuff that I didn't want to hear, or was, you know, I was full of fear. Of course, this is stuff I don't know. And we sat out at that same picnic table, and what he did was he put the book on the table, and he asked me about my drinking, and he talked to me about his drinking. And we didn't open that book for 2 hours that we sat there. And, you know, I don't know if you're anything like me, but when I sit down with a guy like this, all that's going through my head is, you're not like me. You don't drink like me. You don't feel like me. You don't act like me. I'm different than you. And after 2.5 hours with this guy whose favorite, you know, his favorite drink is vodka. His favorite time to drink is in the morning. He started when he was a teenager. He started drinking when he was 13 years old. I mean, all these similarities, all these God moments that came in. Now, I don't know that they're God moments. I don't know that God's connecting the dots because I don't have a God in my understanding of my life at this point. I've been trying to be self-reliant my whole life, been failed miserably, and I don't know what he's trying to do. But what he did was, and what he had was that look that Ebby had when he came to Bill's house that day. He had the look in his eyes, and that look was all I remember thinking is, God, I want to look like that sober. How do I look like that sober? You know, sober had always been like a sentence to me. And I really wanted, after that 2 hour period where he had kind of drawn me in, and there was some, for lack of a better term, some trust built. Like I kind of felt like I knew him a little bit better. Because I did, because he had talked about his drinking, he had talked about his past, he had talked about his recovery, and how he got there. And he left it at that day. And he left, and he said, I'd like to come back in a couple of days if that's okay. And I said, that's awesome. And as I'm talking about it, man, my spirit feels starts to feel more alive. It's incredible. And I felt that way. I felt, man, I don't know if it's the smallest glimmer of hope, which I think is the greatest gift you can give to a guy like me, because I am black inside. I am dark inside. My spirit is completely dead at the end of my drinking. I have no idea what to do, and I have no idea how to wake that up. I don't know that that's what I need. I don't know how to go about doing that, any of that stuff, but I know I had to do something. And I knew that the way he looked, that look in his eyes, was something that I really wanted. So 2 days later, he came back and we started reading. And of course, the first thing he read to me was the foreword to the first edition. You know, as I was sitting here, I was thinking about three things before this meeting. It's absolutely unbelievable. I see Chris R and I see Mama Goat, I think it was, or, you know, and I'm thinking, boy, this is a group of people that would never normally mix. You know what I mean? And I'm thinking about the foreword to the first edition, because it's the first thing I read to everybody. And this week seems to be, for me at work, the Herbert Spencer week. You know, I must have used that quote 10 times. And of course, I think Eric said something about the Herbert Spencer quote before the meeting, you know, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. You know what I mean? Anyway, um, Alex comes 2 days later, and we read the Ford of the first edition, and this what we read in the second before the second edition, and about how 50%, 75%, and I'm like, I've never even tried this. I had no idea that there was that kind of success with doing what's in this book. Still not really knowing what is in this book, and because what I heard in the rooms was just 3%. You know, I go to rehab. They say, well, there's 30 of you here, 2 of you are going to recover, and the rest of you are going to continue drinking. You know, and then I read these, read that stuff, and the hope factor continued. You know, and we started to read the doctor's opinion, of course. And he was a line by line guy. You know, it took us a while to get through this stuff, but he was also a we're going to meet every couple days guy. You know what I mean? Which I thought I'd never. You know, I thought, well, once a week we're going to read a story in the back of the book, and I'm reading the big book. You know what I mean? And he's a we would read through a line for the emotional appeal or whatever the line was, and we talk about that. He'd ask me questions. What does that look like to you? Well, I mean, at one point, my kids were clinging to my legs, begging me not to leave the house. My wife is just saying, please, please just don't go drink again. You know, talk about frothy emotional appeal. I mean, did it stop me from going? Absolutely not. It never sufficed for me. But when I start reading this stuff, I'm like, wow, like this is me. I can see myself in this. And I start to connect with that, man. And my spirit starts to connect with that. And I get the feeling, man, I love the way I feel right now. And I can remember what that felt like, you know? We started and we continued through the book. I say we don't rush, but I'll tell you this. I'm a, I, I was a sick guy, and Alex could see that. We started reading, we went through 1, 2, and 3 fairly rapidly. What he told me was, he said, we're going to go through this with pace and momentum because Jay, I don't think you're going to last if we don't, and that's the way the book.
Gently, just gently, because
Jay, somehow you got muted, buddy. Somehow you got muted.
Where did I get muted? Where was I?
You don't think your sponsor didn't think you were going to last?
My sponsor didn't think I was going to last. So I said we didn't rush through this, and we didn't, but he did say we're going to go through this with pace and momentum because there are timelines in the book. I didn't know that. I was always told, I don't know, a step a year, or, I know people that were doing their 4 steps, and I'd say, how long have you been doing your 4 step? Oh, 4 or 5 months, and my sponsor said, when I'm ready, I'll know it. I'm like, and that's what I was told. I was told, you'll do the steps when you're ready. I'm thinking, I have no idea. I'm never going to be ready. I'm never ready to do this stuff. I don't even know I need to do this stuff, for God's sake. And Alex, this is what I know about Alex. He was great. We sit down, we start reading him within a couple of weeks. We finished. We go through one and two, and to tell you the truth, listen, I knew all about how powerless I was. Some of the questions he asked me: did you ever drink when you didn't want to? Yeah. I had been drinking when I didn't want to for a decade probably. Unable to, without the power to say no. When my head says drink, I drink. He says, you're not management material. We're going to fire the manager. Step 2, he kind of gave me a pass on. And by that, I mean this. It says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Thank God for that. Thank God I didn't have to come to this immediate realization that God was working in my life. I wasn't raised I don't know if this matters or not, but for me, it mattered. I wasn't raised in a religious family. I was raised in a Methodist family. I still don't even know what that means. We went to church twice a year, and my parents drank every night. If that's what it means to be a Methodist, you know what? Okay, you know what I mean? But I have no idea about any relationship with God or any kind of spiritual relationship. So at about 2 weeks sober, Alex, we sit down and we read 60 to 63, very line by line. He was great because I had always read on 60, it says, being convinced we were at step 3, and he goes, that's not what it says. I said, well, that's what the words say. He goes, no, what it says is being convinced, comma, we are at step 3. Are you convinced that A, you're alcoholic and cannot manage your own life? B, that probably no human power could relieve your alcoholism, and C, that God couldn't? What if you were saw it? And I think I said yes because I thought it was the right answer and I wanted to sound good. The fact of the matter was I knew something was happening. This is the way it worked for me. I woke up somewhere along that 2-week period, and I didn't think about alcohol right away. As a matter of fact, I hadn't thought about alcohol for a couple days. And I've been reading the things he told me to read and been doing the things he told me to do. He's told me to start praying right from the beginning. And I said to him, I don't know. What does that mean? He said, I'll give you a couple simple prayers. All I ask is that if you can, get on your knees in the morning. If you can't, that's okay. I don't think God really minds how we try to connect with him. But I'm going to give you a couple simple prayers. He gave me the third step prayer and the seventh step prayer. He said, why don't you say these prayers and maybe pray for your children too? Or make some personal prayers along with it. I'm not asking you to spend a half an hour, but make contact with the God of your understanding. First thing in the morning. And if you don't believe in that, pray to my God, he said. He said, my God's big enough for both of us. And so I started doing that. A couple weeks into the step process, I realized that I hadn't thought about a drink, and I was feeling this feeling like that whole happy and sober at the same time on purpose feeling like I hadn't felt that. 2 weeks sober, he hands me a 4-step, which I thought was a little bit quick. I'm still trying, in my head, I'm still thinking about, is he doing this right or whatever? But I was really gotten to the point where I knew something was happening. He hands me a 4-step. He says, you have 10 days to finish this. He said, it shouldn't take you anywhere near 10 days to finish this. And if you're not done in 10 days, get a new sponsor. But this time I kind of liked the guy. You know what I mean? He was doing some things that I was feeling some kind of good way. And I was like, wow, that's a little bit rough. You know what I mean? Fact of the matter was 4 days later, I was done with my 4-step. We sit down and we do 5, 6, and 7. And I'll tell you my amends. This is where my spirit, at this point, I know something's going on. Something really cool is happening. And he would always say to me, he'd say, you know what the cool thing about the 12 steps of spiritual awakening is? He says, you can't make it happen and you can't stop it from happening if you do the work. That's the cool thing. You can't make it happen on your own and you can't stop it from happening if you follow the directions in this book. And I was like, wow, that's really cool, because I knew I was feeling some kind of thing. When we get to step 8 and I write down my 8th step, another thing that I had been told, you do your 5th step, you burn your 4th step. That's what I was told for a long time. And you do your 5th step, you burn your 4th step. Well, this sponsor didn't tell me that, thank God. He said, we use our 4th step so we can make our 8th step list. New information to me, really cool. So I make my 8th step list, and there's a guy at the top of my 8th step list. He is at the top of the list. And he's a friend of mine in Alcoholics Anonymous who has found a way out and was sober 12 years at the time. Sponsoring a boatload of guys, just doing the deal, man. Really, really cool cat. And I had, during my active addiction, I was part of his wedding party. And I had started drinking prior to his wedding. And he took me aside, not knowing I'm drinking, and says, listen, I'm going on my honeymoon. I need you to, he was a contractor, I'm a contractor. He said, I need you to, if you could, run my company for a week. You're going to finish off a couple jobs. You're going to collect some money. And when I come back, just tell the guys I'll pay him. And I said, absolutely, Mike, I'll be glad to take care of that. Well, he goes on his honeymoon and I collect this $5,000 and I go to some sorted spots and I end up spending it in about 2.5 weeks. What I do is I hide from him for 4 years. He's blown up my phone, all this kind of stuff. I can't, of course, talk to him because I'm filled with guilt, shame, remorse. Fear is overwhelming me. I can't talk to Mike. And so he's at the top of my 8th step list. And my sponsor says, who's at the top of your 8th step list? And my response to him was, there's no way. No, absolutely not, were my 2 words. Absolutely not. And he said, of course, remember you agreed to go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. And I thought, how corny is that, man? But he was dead serious. And he says, you need to call Mike. And I had this thing that I hadn't had for a while. It's called a job. And I had another thing I hadn't had, which is called a bank account. And I had a little money in it. I had a little job, so I had a little money. And he says, you need to call Mike. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to go bad. He's going to kill me. I call up Mike and I expect to be read the riot act. Where are you? And where's my $5,000? We used to be friends, all that kind of stuff. And I call him up and I said, Mike, it's Jay Mallet. And he says, I've been praying for you. And I think, well, how do I respond to that? What do I say to that? I wanted him to yell at me. I felt I deserved all that stuff, but he's had a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps and taken multitudes of other guys through it. He's a killer. He says, I've been praying for you. And I was like, I didn't say anything. I put the phone back to my ear. He says, I figure if I got a phone call from you and you sounded as good as you sound, you must be doing better. How are you doing, Jay? And I said, I'm doing better, Mike. I said, I'd like to know if I could buy you lunch this Thursday. Now, at this point, of course, he knows what this is. This is an amends phone call, which is really cool. I arranged to buy him lunch that Thursday. I hang up the phone with Mike and I call my sponsor, and like a good alcoholic, I say, Alex, you'll never believe it. I called Mike up. He said he was really cool about it. I'm going to buy him lunch this Thursday. Here's a little side information. I had $600 in the bank. I hadn't had $600 in a very long time because I do a lot of cash business. Okay, I had $600 in this bank account. I called my sponsor. I said, "You're never going to believe it. Going to do this amends with Mike on Thursday. I'm going to bring $50 and I'm going to make a payment plan and all kinds of things." He says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" He says, "How much money do you have in the bank?" I said, "Well, I have $600 in the bank." He says, you need to bring him $500. I said, $500? I can't afford to bring him $500. He says, you can't afford not to, right? Can't afford not to. Half measures didn't avail me anything. They availed me nothing my whole life. So I take $500 out of the bank and I take 2 buses and 2 trains. It takes 2.5 hours from get to where I am in Philadelphia to where he is in New Jersey. He picks me up, talk about awkward, incredible. I'm praying the whole time because now I have a prayer life and I have a somewhat of a belief in a higher power. And this whole thing is working and my spirit's waking up and I'm really grooving with this whole thing. Full of fear, though, full of fear. And we sit down and we do this deal. And I go through the 5 things that I take my guys through and when we're making amends. I'm here because I was wrong, all that stuff. And I leave Mike. He agrees to this payment plan, and I leave Mike, and he drops me back off at this train. And as I'm sitting there waiting for this train pulls up, and I get on this train, and I swear, if I could have floated home. I don't know what the heck happened to my insides, to my spirit. Well, I know exactly what happened to my spirit. My spirit woke up that day. I got on that train, and I knew absolutely, without any question, for the first time in my life, that there was something to the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, that they were real, that they worked, and they were certainly working in my life. I felt in such a way I had never felt in recovery before. I didn't think it was possible to feel that way in recovery, man. It was absolutely amazing to me. And I came back to Philadelphia and try to pass that on to all the guys that I work with. Am I almost out of time here? Probably am.
No, you've
So
got plenty of time, dude. You've got plenty of time.
Okay. Just amazing. I come back and I continue with this amends process, and that was a great example of how my spirit woke up and the amends that went great. And many of my amends with my parents and my brothers and sisters went, the usual way, just keep doing what you're doing, all that kind of stuff. My ex-wife was one I had to make amends to. And it's amazing how God connects the dots. We were up in New York State. All our kids are up there. My wife and I are up there. And I'm trying to get her alone so I can make my amends, which to me were described as they're always eyeball to eyeball, face to face. You never do these over the phone. You never do these, any other way, if at all possible. And she and I don't live in the same state anymore. So we were together at this place in New York State. But we're at a pool and there's all kind of adults and my children are there and everything. And I go out, I need some quiet time to connect with God. I go to pray and I go out the front of the house. And I sit on a chair in the front of the house alone. There's nobody, everybody's out back. I'm out front and I'm praying. For some ungodly reason or for some godly reason, my ex-wife walks out the front door. And I said, "What are you doing out here?" She said, "I'm just trying to get away from everybody, get some peace of mind." I said, "Would you mind coming and sitting down?" And I made amends to my wife. And she turned to me and she said, "Our marriage was a mistake." And I thought, wow. Like that was not all the responses I had gotten up to that point were like, "Yeah, Jay, you're doing great. Keep doing what you're doing," all that kind of stuff. And a great equalizer for me. She was absolutely right. She's absolutely right for reasons I won't get into now. But a great lesson for me that it's not just about everybody saying, "Oh, you're doing great." She was honest with me, and she let me have it. She let me have it pretty good for a little while, And but I needed that lesson because if I'm going to share as I'm sharing my experience with other new guys, I have to let them know, this isn't always going to go the way you think it's going to go, and it's not always going to go the way it went with Mike that day. This is real life here, and I hurt that woman. I did a lot of things that I wish I hadn't have done, and I get back and Alex and I talk about all this stuff, and here in Philadelphia, I don't know. We talk a lot about living in 10, 11, and 12. My life today, and no matter what I'm doing, I happen to work in the field. My life basically revolves around being in recovery, being helpful in recovery, doing things in recovery. I do have some outside interests, but a lot of my time is spent doing this kind of work. It's what fires me up to do the other stuff. Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a great life, but I'm also very aware. Larry T from Los Angeles says that what causes more relapses in Alcoholics Anonymous is the good life that Alcoholics Anonymous has given us, right? And I can be taken out of this really, really quickly if I start taking, if I start thinking that I'm the reason that I'm doing so well, that my life is so amazing. I know it's only through an amazing God who has blessed me and graced me over and over and over. The more I concentrate on my relationship with God, the God of my understanding, the better my life becomes. You couldn't have convinced me that was possible when I started going through the work. I didn't have any idea that I had a spiritual problem when I came in here. My sponsor at one point says to me, "Hey, you know what the big secret in AA is?" I said, "No, what's the big secret?" I'm early in recovery. I want to know what the big secret is. He says, "We don't come in here to get sober." I said, "Really? You don't come to Alcoholics Anonymous to get sober?" He goes, "We come in here to get spiritual, and the byproduct is sobriety." I'm like, "Wow, dude, that's like I thought he was like mountaintop stuff." You know what I mean? Like I thought it was, and but it's so true, right? I mean, that's the more I focus on my spiritual condition, the more I try to think of others before myself, the more I do all the stuff that we read about in the book. And it's amazing to be on a book on a meeting like this with so many other people. I wish you guys all lived in Philadelphia because you know pockets of enthusiasm and all that kind of stuff. It's still rough a lot of times to get people. I work in the field, and if I start talking about going through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous through the big book, it would fall on such deaf ears. They just don't seem to want to hear it. I think those of us who carry this message, who have been through the work, who've had a spiritual awakening, who've done this stuff, um, I feel like I have to continue to do it the way we do it because there are not very, I won't say very few of us, but less of us than I would hope that there would be. I think it should be really be easy to go to a big book breakdown. I go to one on Friday night with a great guy, Chris B here in Philadelphia. And, there's 20 people there. The room holds 100. It's just, talk about spreading the good news. You can tell by the excitement of my voice how I feel about this process and my life today and how I feel today and what I do today. And it's all because of a relationship with the God of my understanding, his grace and mercy, and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's all I got. Thanks, guys.